Hello educators, I'm Mr. Jerry Comeyas from Woodrow Wilson Middle School in Tampa, Florida. And our students have just participated in the Everglades Foundation's Civic Action Project, the Everglades Champions program. You're going to want to get involved in this, and it's really a lot of fun because students can get involved in project-based learning, civic action that make a difference right there in your own community. Now our students chose a project that is really close to home, and that is Hillsborough Bay, just 2 blocks away from our school. Families run down that sidewalk, the longest unbroken sidewalk in the United States. They skateboard down it, they ride bikes on it. I mean, it is a really in-your-face place right here in the Tampa Bay community. Problem is, it stinks. It is filthy. You can't eat any fish that you catch there, and the water quality is very poor. So our students automatically were leaning toward making a difference there. They talked about seagrasses, mangroves, and oysters, and really saw oysters as being the key species to help that bay turn around. Improve water quality, mitigate storm surge. This became a huge part of what we wanted to do. You're going to hear from our students right now as they take you through our journey in oyster shell recycling, vertical oyster gardens, and this year, oyster reef balls that we deploy right out into the bay, where our students have filed for a permit with the city of Tampa to be able to have their own oyster garden. Stay tuned and listen to our student project for 2025 from Wilson Middle School.
Okay, so this is our presentation for Step 2 issue selection by Grayson McKenzie, Sebastian Wong, and Alexander Dow. So an environmental citizen, during the somewhat middle of our ag communications year, we teamed up in groups and drew a picture of an environmental citizen. So basically what an environmental citizen is being informed and involved in activities to help the environment. And we would draw a picture of one with different names, with labels, metaphors, and details about what our ideal image was.
Okay, so who is Aquatech? Aquatech is the group that has agreed to receive our oyster gardens, and they decided to actually plant them in the water. They're working the main cause that we are working on for this project.
So these are our pictures of our environmental citizens. As you can see, there are lots of variety of what we have drawn. Stakeover mapping. This was an assignment that we did a couple months ago, where we answered questions and where we did things where we had identified stakeholders, we identified and researched policies and practices. We debriefed and analyzed the policy and practice information that they found. Here you can see the next slide to see the answers to the questions. As you can see, there's all the answers to the questions that we did.
Criteria-based decision making is finding multiple ways of getting responses and how to do our mission in the best way possible.
Our main community issue is oysters. The changes in the population of oysters, which is the oysters are decreasing due to overfishing and stuff like that, because oysters actually clean the water by filtering out excess nutrients and bacteria. And since oysters are being overfished, there aren't enough oysters in the water, which means that the water is getting worse. So our main goal is to see if we can try to put as many oysters back into the water as possible.
Okay, so our presentation / PowerPoint is about the community practice and policy research. Learning the history of the Everglades. The Everglades was formed over 5,000 years ago as a slow-moving river of grass, once home to indigenous people. It faced major drainage in the 1900s for development. Ecological damage spurred conservation, including Everglades National Park in 1947, and today restoration efforts aim to reverse decades of environmental decline.
Learning the history of Spanish Town Creek. Spanish Town Creek in Tampa Bay was the site of the first recorded non-native settlement in the area. Established around 1783 by Spanish-speaking fishermen, the creek flowed from near present-day Delaware Avenue to Platt Street into Hillsborough Bay. Over time, it was filled and incorporated into Tampa's stormwater system. This is important because it was forgotten a long time ago, and it's a part of the Tampa watershed. It was the first fishing village in Tampa, and like I said earlier, one of the first settlements here too. So that's why it's important.
Hola, ¿cómo están? This is step 4, goal and strategy selection and statements.
Last year, our school made these vertical oyster gardens, and people would rent them outside. We had a box like this. You scan the QR code, it'll take you to a Google folder. You would fill out the form, and you can unlock the lock to get one of these. And then we'd ask for your camera permission and monitoring so we can see how many oysters are colonizing. They'd hang them off their docks just by a little bit, like this. So the water goes up here, and then when the low tide comes, it goes down. That's the best and most beneficial tide for oysters. And we also made these oyster reef balls, which we placed in the water. And in between Davis Island Bridge, we're making a big project where we're trying to get a city permit to put them in between so oysters can colonize there. And we're also trying to get oyster rack pots. They can also come in many sizes. Here's a tiny one. And this is a huge one that our school has just been starting to do. So, this is everybody that helped us in our civic action project.
They were a bunch of people that worked with us, but the main impact was Kate Vangelo and the Everglades Foundation and tons of others.
Cold calling restaurants. So, we decided we need oysters to make vertical oyster gardens because, you need shells to make oyster gardens. So we decided to cold call restaurants to ask them for the top part of their oyster shell because they normally throw those away. So they don't really use those. Aquatech Eco Consultant is going to receive our oyster shells from our restaurants, and they're going to put them into the bay.
Tabletop sustainability message. Tabletop messages were a big part and played a big role. During restaurants, we created a few, and we would love to put them in restaurants because they helped us get the messages out, and a lot of information was put on all of them.
The overreaching goal for our civic action projects. Our goals were to help people raise more awareness and make sure that people know what happened to Hillsborough Bay and what we need to do to fix it. Because of that, we did a watershed event on April 15th. This helped people raise awareness. We had some performances. We also had guest speakers show up, like Tate Vangelo, from the Eco Everglades Foundation, and we also made flyers for the watershed event to spread out to the whole school. We went to the Disney AgriScience lab where we had these headphones. He would tell us information through our headphones. There was these towers which made it easier for the plants, so the water would drizzle down, so the plants would get as much as they need and not overflow and they get drowned. Each time they have one of these cabbage patches, they leave a secret image right here. You might see the Mickey. Over here we have the pumpkins. They have a bottom system, so the water actually goes up and around and back out. And then over here we have aquaculture. Who knew Disney did aquaculture? They have fish and plants on top of each other.
Yep.
So this is step 5 of our Everglades Restoration Project, planning and taking action. This is when we went to our Epcot trip 2 weeks ago, and we learned about what Epcot is doing to help the agriculture industry. This is an example of our Tinker Cat oyster reef ball, accurate description of what the bay will look like when we put in our oyster reef balls. This is our letter to Aquatech asking if they will partner with us to help with our oysters. And this is our custom oyster shell coasters that we made for our watershed event. And this is our environmental restoration permitting request to the city to ask for a reduction of the pay for putting oyster reef balls in the water. And this is an example of our watershed celebration event flyer for the event that goes along with the coasters.
Step 6. Celebrate and reflect.
This year, our class made tabletop sustainability messaging flyers to put out at our watershed event and to inform people of the work we do. We did something similar with drink coasters that would be given to restaurants that partner with us to show their customers how oysters help and what our school does to save the bay, but most importantly, how an everyday person could also be a part of restoring Tampa Bay. Finally, our watershed event allowed us to showcase our knowledge and show everyone who came what we're doing to help and the effects of our efforts.
We shared lessons with other schools. So we took a trip to Mitchell Elementary to teach the 5th graders about our watershed here in South Tampa. They were taught about Spanish Town Creek and how the water basically flows through our watershed. And we taught them about VOGs and how oysters work and how we're restoring our bay. So exploring the headwaters of the Upper Everglades. So during our Upper Everglades tour near the Kissimmee River in Orlando, we went to Epcot and we got to see all sorts of environmental stuff, but we did take a day to go to this place called Shingle Creek. It's called Shingle Creek because they used to take the cypress trees, turn them into shingles, and they would be good for the roofs because they would repel water.
While on our trip to Epcot, on the second day we went to a little park and we went hiking up the river to test the water quality. While testing the water quality, we found out that it was very good, low pH, and then we went kayaking up the river of the Everglades.
Hey, I'm Amar. I'm outside today to tell you about what I learned at the Osceola History Museum about the Upper Everglades. At the museum, I saw old maps and photos that showed how people used the land a long time ago, like old trails and canals they traveled through the swamps. I also learned that the Everglades are full of animals like alligators, birds, and the Florida panther, which is also called the ghost cat. This is because it's so rare. The swamp is always alive with sounds like hoots and bellows from other animals. The museum shows farming and building changed the land and how important it is to protect places like the Everglades today. It helped me to understand that the Everglades is a sacred place that should be unharmed, untouched, and should be preserved so future generations can cherish it.
And here's pictures of our Epcot trip. We did the Moana watershed stations, as you can see here. On the bottom left, this is a water thing. You can touch it. It would make a sound. It was pretty cool. And we did the behind the scenes tour, which was pretty cool because we got to see all sorts of plants, and we have a banana tree right there. It was beautiful at Epcot right here with all those flowers in the lake. So how did we measure the impact of our project? So we measured it by looking at our accomplishments, right? So we've worked with this company called Ecotech Eco Consultants. So we convinced them to take our oyster shells that we collect from the restaurants, our local seafood restaurants, and they basically take them, they clean them, they dry them out, and then we receive them ready to go for VOGs. We can deploy them, and they don't stink anymore because they don't have any food waste on them. We also filed a permit with the city of Tampa to start our own oyster bed near where Spanish Town Creek empties out near Davis Island Bridge. And it's only a few blocks from our school. It's a really nice location, and it's in the final stages of approval. How do we feel about what we accomplished? We feel really good, and we feel that there needs to be much more done in Hillsborough Bay. We feel that this is a good anchor for the next steps in returning Hillsborough Bay to its previous state before we polluted it. But we haven't solved the problem yet, and we need to continue to work to solve it. So what was the most important thing we learned from this project? We learned how to use tools when we created VOGs and oyster reef balls. We called different restaurants, local restaurants, for example, American Social, Boozy, Rick's on the River. We called them up and asked them if they would give us the tops of their oyster shells that we could use for VOGs. And this improved our communication skills, and made us more confident and assertive. So what still needs to be done? We need to establish a permanent population of oysters in Hillsborough Bay. If we don't have that, it can't be healthy and sustainable. We need to inform people of the need of oysters because not a lot of people know what oysters do in our bay. And if we can inform people about that, maybe then they can advocate for the restoration of oysters in Hillsborough Bay. We also need to find a way to produce enough VOGs and oyster bags to give out to the community. That was step 6. Reflect and celebrate. Thank you.
Here at Wilson, we learn about cultural heritage and animal ecosystems through art. Using chalk and creativity, we made various drawings of the sea creatures that live in our area. We also get to help our environment through making oyster rags and VOGs. This hands-on approach assists us in actually making a difference, even as kids.
So the Wilson Middle School Agri-Science program is unique in that our focus is on urban agriculture and environmental resilience. We have products like other agricultural programs do, for example, rabbits and ducks and fish, but we also focus on growing things like mangroves or oysters in order to improve water quality and resist storm surge. So our students are learning a lot about the environmental connection to agriculture.
So we're creating little structures for oysters to grow on by soaking small cloths in concrete with a metal stake and a wooden base so they stick into a riverbed. We need these so the oysters can grow back into their natural habitat, and this is the perfect object so they can grow on.
I've learned so much. Oysters can even filter 50 gallons per day just as a single oyster. And they can filter through dirt, they can filter through any biological pollutant in any place. And it's very useful in Tampa Bay specifically because we have a lot of fertilizer problems and runoff.
So today we're working with the students to create something called an oyster rag pot. And it's basically just a cost-effective means to reintroduce a hard material to the waterways where oysters can grow. We have a 10-acre permitted oyster restoration site in the Manatee River, and that's where all these will end up there on May the 7th. That's our next deployment date. So I love this because it's a craft project, it's an ecology project, and it's very tactile and hands-on. You know, we sneak in the lesson of why. They learn like a little bit of oyster biology and how their reproductive processes work. But there's that tactile part of it, so that their hand on it, and they know that when they do this, like every one of these that they make, that's going to grow a dozen oysters on our site. So they can, we talked a little bit about water filtration rates and those sorts of things, and I know they learn about that a lot too. This is something hands-on that they have a part of it. So if they know where the Manatee River is, when they go over, they can look down and say, I put some of those oysters back. I helped be a part of that project.
I think the most exciting is watching the students when they are learning this for the first time and recognize that they could actually be a part of the solution. So it's not just something that they're reading about in a textbook. This is project-based learning and civic action. The students are getting involved and making a difference in their community.
Action. Alright, so I want to talk to you about the time when we went down into the river across Armature Works to grab some garbage. We went down there, just grab some glass and plastic from a river, to clean it and make it better. We found some pretty cool things like this railroad nail. And while we were there, we put a oyster reef ball in there. And that's about it.
Action.
Thank you for watching our aquaculture video on how we can change the water for the better, and we hope that you can do the same to your water as well.
Muchas gracias por escucharnos. Chao.
Thank you.